Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is doing really well. So, we are on to the next step in the journey of learning Spring Boot internals. In the last video, we discussed about Dispatcher Servlet. In that video, we understood the concept of Dispatcher Servlet with the generic idea of doors inside a house, wherein the way to remember it was that we enter the home from the main door, entrance door, or the living room door, and that leads us to the other doors of the other rooms. It could be the room on the ground floor or the top floor. It could lead us to a smaller room or a bigger room in terms of our definition. Now, today, we take a look at how Spring Boot makes our life easier with auto configuring a dispatcher servlet. So, we are back to the same project we saw in the session of server.port. Today, we are going to see another property with respect to Spring Boot, wherein we will enable the Spring Boot to run at a debug level, and we are also going to see a first starter dependency. So let's start. This is the project that we saw in server.port video, and in this project you can see there are two Java classes. First one is Spring Boot application, wherein we this is the start of our application. This annotation will auto-wire and auto-configure the beans that are required. Then, for this particular video, I have created a controller class. In controller class, it can be, you can say it as the MVC, C part of the MVC, wherein we can define a controller with @controller or @rest controller annotation. Then for the controller, we have couple of methods, which is get hello and get hello world. Both are get endpoints. So the first method that we'll see is this request mapping value equal to hello world, and method is requestMethod.GET. So this particular method will be invoked when we have an endpoint with the name of hello world, and the request type is of get. So what we are going to do, we are just constructing a hello world object, string object, and we are returning that hello world object with HTTP status as okay. There is another method of get hello, wherein the it will be invoked when the request contains hello in the hello in the URL, and we construct a hello object. We return the hello object with the HTTP status okay. The interesting thing to note over here is the request mapping value equal to hello world and method request method.get is converted into just a get mapping of hello. So this particular annotation or configuration of get mappings of request mapping where request method.get is a shortened version of the entire configuration that we have done here. Okay. Now the reason that we are discussing this particular controller, and why I'm going ahead and discussing multiple times the configuration of hello and hello world is that we will draw the inference today, wherein in the previous session we understood how dispatcher servlet works. In today's session, we will see that the hello endpoint and hello world endpoint kind of sit behind this first forward slash. Okay, and this first forward slash is where Spring Boot configures our dispatcher servlet. Okay, so this is why we are discussing a bit on the request mapping side. Now, I'll take you to the project again. So you can see there's one Java class here, and then one Java class on the hello controller, and there's nothing else specific to dispatcher servlet in our entire project. So if you're coming from Spring MVC background, you might remember that there are dispatcher servlet configuration, web.xml, all those other things that we configure for filter, handler, mappers, and so on. But we don't see anything over here. Okay, so let's see what happens is let's just go over here. Okay, so first let's see how this one is working. Okay, so when I start up my application, I also need to use the browser. I have it here. So my application is started. Okay, started application on port 8080. So let's see. I'm using local loopback address. it got the request and it returned hello. And let's see how it responds when we call hello world. So it's working. Okay, both the controller methods are getting invoked, and Springboot is able to understand that whenever the request is coming with this particular path, it calls the second method, and when it comes with just the hello part, it calls the first method. But there has to be certain logic for it to understand that, okay, whenever this request contains this, I have to redirect this particular call to this method, to redirect that call to this method. So how this works is we suggest the mapping of the path that we are expecting, and it will be able to redirect it. But if we remember the previous session wherein the dispatcher servlet acts as the front controller, so it decides to which particular controller and which particular method that call has to go through. So in Spring Boot, we don't see, currently we are not able to see anything with respect to dispatcher servlet configuration, but I'll take you to the logs. This is the log that we just saw, which was generated. So in here you see that there is a log which says tomcat localhost, and this is the first forward slash where initializing spring embedded web application context, and then it started the application, and then initializing spring dispatcher servlet, initializing spring servlet dispatcher servlet. So somehow it it knew that we have configured the controllers and we have endpoints, so it automatically configured dispatcher servlet. So this is the log that is important for this particular discussion. But what if let's see, we don't have any of these methods. Okay, let's comment it out and then let's see what it happens. So it initialized the Spring Web application contents. It started the Spring Boot application in seconds, in some seconds. Now it did it really initialize it or did it not? So let's see what it does. So it says the web page cannot be found, most likely because other details that are present here. But again, the same log that we were seeing previously, it did initialize the Spring Dispatcher servlet. It did initializing the servlet, dispatcher servlet. So these logs that were present previously are still coming up. So it's not related to the way or the code that we have written here in any ways, so that it initializes dispatcher servlet. So let's uncomment it and look at the property that we were discussing at the start. Okay, this will be helpful. Hmm. Now let's enable this debug to true. See what happens. And let's go back to terminal. It's not running. Okay. So whenever we run the Spring Boot application with debug equal to true, okay, it generates a conditional evaluation report. So this is the report wherein Spring Boot print itself whatever conditions it was able to match for the beans at the class path, and what are the positive matches, what are the negative matches. Okay, so currently our discussion is focused around dispatcher servlet. So this particular log we have already seen that initializing the Spring embedded web application context at the first forward slash. Additionally, you see a lot of details over here. Mapping filters. So filters is another thing that we used to configure. Form content filter, request content filter, and then there is a URL. The first forward slash. After the first forward slash, it considers everything. Then mapping dispatcher servlet URL. So currently it's empty. It's mapping the dispatcher servlet URLs to the first forward slash. Additionally, there are four mappings in request handler mapping. All these particular details, model attributes, init binder, request advisor, response body advice, all these things we will be able to see in the later part of of our playlist. But the dispatcher servlet is does configured. Now let's see how does it actually configure it. Okay, so it says that it configured, but we didn't provide any particular class for dispatcher servlet, nor did we provide any configuration. So what happens is, in dispatcher servlet auto configuration, this is the auto configuration which is kind of assumed, or which people see it as the magic of Spring Boot. What happened is, it says on conditional on class found required class org spring framework web servlet dispatcher servlet. So it was able to find the dispatcher servlet at your class path. Okay, but we did not provide any particular class over here that we created with this particular name, but it still was able to find this dispatcher servlet. So let's go to the pom.xml and see what dependencies we have. We have a Spring Boot starter web, we have Spring Boot starter and Spring Boot Kafka. Okay, so let me comment this particular project out. Let's try to again start the project. Oh, I also have to comment a code here because we just removed the dependencies for this. Okay, this Spring Boot is again started up, and now let's see dispatcher. Dispatcher servlet did not match on conditional class, did not find the required class org spring framework web servlet dispatcher servlet. So you see what difference it made. When we commented this particular method, it was not able to find the dispatcher servlet class, but when we have this method uncommented, or when we have this dependency uncommented, it is able to find the relevant class that is required for our application. So that means this dispatcher servlet is automatically coming from the dependency, the Spring Boot starter dependency that we have added on the class path, and hence we say that creating Spring Boot applications with respect to starter projects really speeds up everything. We'll again see why. See, I have uncommented the dependency that we commented previously, and now let's again search for dispatcher servlet. So dispatcher servlet conditional found the class at org spring framework web servlet dispatcher servlet. Now let's go a bit into the details. So this is the dependency, the Spring Boot Starter Web. In this Spring Boot Starter Web, you will find the Spring Web MVC dependency. In the Spring Web MVC dependency, you have all these ORG Spring Framework, Spring Web. Okay, this is the dependency that is of interest to us. Let's go and try to find this dependency. Okay, I missed it. Web, here it is. Okay. Spring Boot Starter Web, Spring Web. Oh, sorry, we need to find the Spring Web MVC. Sorry. So Web Servlet, and in the DispatcherServlet.class, there is a DispatcherServlet.class, which is kind of concrete implementation. You can see the entire class is written for you. Okay. Then apart from dispatcher servlet, you have handler adapter class, you have handler mapping class, handler interceptor class, you have view resolver class. All these particular classes are already available at your class path. Additionally, you see this no handler found exception. This is the exception that we get when we are not able to find a particular correct mapping for that particular endpoint. So all these dependencies are helping us to have the concrete implementation of the beans. So for our example, the dispatcher servlet at our class path, and Spring Boot is intelligent enough to configure that dispatcher servlet for us. So next time if someone asks you if there is any concept of dispatcher servlet with Spring Boot, yes or no? So yes, there is a concept of Spring Boot with dispatcher servlets. Dispatcher servlets are coming by default with the starter dependency, that the starter dependency is Spring Boot starter web. Okay, and what this does is, there is a Spring Web MVC project in this dependency, starter dependency, and that the Web MVC project has a dispatcher servlet configured for us, and which Spring Boot is able to auto detect with the help of dispatcher servlet auto configuration. and then it is able to serve all the endpoints that are required. So it the dispatcher servlet acts as the front controller, or the previous, in the words of previous discussion that we had, it acts as the front door to all the doors that we can have in our application. Okay, so this is the Spring Boot web servlet discussion for the current session. In the next session we will see how we can configure the dispatcher servlet to other endpoints. For example, currently the dispatcher servlet is configured to this particular first forward slash. But in the discussion of previous in the previous video, we saw that there was endpoints such as UAS, wherein this was the path. Okay, then there was a path which was started like this. Okay, so if I have US at the starting of each and every endpoint, doesn't it make sense that I configure my dispatcher servlet to the US part only, and then all the endpoints are within US? Or maybe if I have some endpoint in US and I have another endpoint in sign up, how will I configure this? So in the next session, we will see a bit more details on how we can configure all these things for dispatcher servlet, and then we will see the working of multiple dispatcher servlet. Okay, so currently this is all for this video. I hope we meet the next time. Please do consider subscribing to the channel, and also like and comment on the videos. Thank you. Thanks for everyone for watching the video. Thanks a lot.